It's Create Day, my friends, and welcome back to another video. Today I've got 10 Christmas ornament DIYs that will hopefully inspire you for your next project. Let's get started. For this first one, I am using this little window frame ornament from Hobby Lobby that I picked up on clearance last year. The first thing I'm going to do is remove all the little embellishments on the front. If you saw my last video, this napkin will look very familiar to you, and I love this one so much I want to use this for this little window frame. So I'm just moving this around to see what area I want to capture for this particular one. Once I decided what piece I wanted to use, I just went ahead and did a rough cut out with my scissors. I found this piece of cardboard in my stash. It's got the white coating on one side, so that was perfect for this. That meant that I did not have to paint this white because I'm going to be decoupaging the napkin piece onto this piece of cardboard. So I'm laying out my window frame and tracing around it so that I can cut this out so that it will fit back behind that window frame. I needed to cut just inside of those lines so that it wouldn't hang out over the edges or the top or the bottom of the window frame. I wanted it to be just a little recessed, but still close enough to the edges that I would be able to glue it down. You can see it's not a perfect cut job, but we will attempt to fix that later on. So now I'm going to use my Mod Podge to go ahead and apply this napkin to the white side of the cardboard piece. I like to work in sections starting at the top. I'm going to smooth that down, and then I can go in and do the middle section and then the bottom section. I let that dry, and then I cut off the excess around the edges. Then I did my second coat of Mod Podge over the entire thing, and when that was dry, I went ahead and sanded off the edges using a downward motion with my sandpaper to get a nice clean edge. Now I'm just checking to make sure this is going to line up the way I want it to. I really wanted that little dog to show up as much as possible, but I think his nose ends up being behind one of the little part of the window frame. I don't know what it is about dogs. I just so partial to dogs. So I've just got some brown craft paper. I'm tracing around the shape of that frame, and then I'm going to trim this up a little bit to make sure it's as straight as I can get. And using Fabri-Tac glue, we're going to go ahead and apply the snow scene to the window frame. And then once I have that in place, I can put that craft paper on the back side of this to help cover up some of that unevenness in the cut that I did. You know, that it just looks just a little off. And so that craft paper will just kind of help disguise that a little bit. So now I'm just going to use my glue stick to apply this piece of craft paper over the back of this to helpfully kind of make it look a little more even. So I'm going to apply that glue stick all the way around the edges and in the middle, and then glue that piece of craft paper on top, kind of adjusting it so that it fits as nice and evenly over this as I can get it. And then we are on to adding some embellishments. I'm keeping this really simple, as you can tell. I'm going to add a couple of pieces of greenery from picks that I have in my stash, and then I tied a little bow out of this ribbon I'm going to just trim up the length of that, the tails, and hot glue that in the middle. As you can tell, I didn't repaint this little ornament, and I kept the original jute twine hanger on it. So this was really simple, really inexpensive. And here's how it turned out. The next ornament is more of a shabby chic look, and I am using this DIY ornament from Dollar Tree. And I'm going to try this. I've never done this before, but where you mix your paint with polyacrylic and then swirl it around on the inside of the ornament. And the color that I picked, called Barely Pink, I just loved it. It was perfect for the transfer I'm going to be using on this ornament. And even though it says it's a chalk paint, it's actually a matte acrylic paint. So I thought this would work just fine. I mixed equal parts polyacrylic to the paint and mixed that up really well, and then poured it into my ornament. And you do need to be really patient with the swirling process. The polyacrylic helps it to flow a lot better. But I ran into a little bit of a problem, and I don't know if it's because of the paint I used. It swirled just fine. It looked absolutely beautiful. But after like a full 24 hours, it was nowhere near being dry. So I'm not sure like what caused that, but I eventually try to fix it and just move on. So now once I get it all swirled around, look how pretty that is. I go ahead and stick it upside down in this plastic cup so that it can drain. So this is the transfer I want to use. Is Iron Orchid Designs Candy King Cottage from this year. I love these pretty little muted flowers. They're just the soft colors, and that was just perfect for this. So I tape it down to hold it in place and then remove that backing sheet and use my transfer tool to apply this on there. Once I have that completely on, I go ahead and burnish it really well with the carrier sheet. And then I wanted to seal this with a clear liquid sealer, and that's where I discovered that this, after a full day, a day and a half, that paint was not dry, because I tried to put it on a dowel rod to hang it upside down, like after I got the sealer on there, and it scratched up the inside. That paint was just not even close to being dry. So here's where I try to fix it. I take some more of the paint, and instead of adding polyacrylic, I add some water to it so that it will flow. It would be too thick otherwise, but just a little bit of water so that I could get it to move around in there. I did the same thing, just recoated it and then set it aside to dry. And now I'm dealing with the cap. I don't want those, the little wire pieces that go down inside of the ornament would scratch that paint up again. So I snipped those off. And then I'm going to go ahead and glue this cap on to the top with my Fabri-Tac glue. At this point, I went ahead and finished it up like this because I let it set for several days and it did seem to be pretty dry. So we'll see. I'm going to hang on to this and see if anything happens to it over time. So now I'm taking a couple of strips of lace that I cut and a strip of tea towel that I tore off from the tea towel. And I'm going to just wrap that around the neck and have them kind of dangling off to the side. Trim them up a little bit. And that's going to do it for this one. Oh, wait, no, except for the hanger. Yeah, got to do the hanger. And for the hanger, I did the same thing. I did some lace and a little piece of tea towel. Just tied a knot at the top. And then now this project is finished. So let me know in the comments what I did wrong with the paint and polyacrylic process. For this one, I'm using a wooden bell ornament that I got from Michael's on clearance. I'm going to decoupage this old music sheet onto it. So I just did a rough cut, figured out if it would cover the way I wanted it to, and then I'm going to go ahead and apply my Mod Podge on there, lay the paper on, and smooth it out and let it dry. There was really no worries about wrinkles with this. This paper, even though it's old, it's pretty thick. So yeah, I just didn't have to worry about the wrinkles at all. I let it dry and then I cut off the excess paper around the edges, and then I was able to go ahead and do a second coat of Mod Podge over the top before doing the final sanding around those edges once that Mod Podge is dry. Once that was all dry and sanded, I took my white gesso, put some out on my mat, added a little water to it, and I'm going to do kind of a whitewash over the music paper and the edges of the bell. So I'm just going to go ahead, I mix this up with that water and I'm going to brush it on. And then when that's completely covered, I will take a baby wipe and just dab off until you can still see the music paper, but it's just not quite as bright as it was. Let that dry and we can go on to the next step. My bell ornament is all ready for the next step. I'm going to be adding this transfer that is from IOD's Figgy Pudding Transfer Set. I'd just lay my bell on top of here so I could find out approximately where I need to cut for this transfer to fit on my bell, and then go ahead and cut that out, and then I can put it on my bell and rub that on. Now with that transfer applied, I went ahead and gave this a coat of my Select Seal matte sealer. I made some castings with my amazing resin that I got from Amazon, and this little silicone mold is from Amazon as well. I will leave links in the description box for all of these items that I can find to add links to. So I'm going to use this little deer on this particular ornament, and then I also casted this tree that I will use on a different one. I gave him a coat of my home decor folk art chalk paint in the color Java, and now I've got the color honeycomb that I'm dry brushing all over. I'm getting a little bit of that on my paintbrush, wiping a lot of it off, and then going over this, just adding a light dry brush paint of this color to start kind of building up to make it look like there's different color variations so that it would look a little more realistic. Next, I'm using medium brown to do the same thing, a dry brush technique over this just to add another layer of color. The final dry brush is with Folk Art's French Linen Chalk Paint. I'm going to do this to just add some highlights to all those little raised areas. I'm using Jolie's Finishing Wax Top Coat Clear to go over the entire bell. I will brush this on, wipe it back, and then that will give me more control over the antiquing wax that I'm going to use next. So in we go with the antiquing wax. I'm starting with the edges. I will brush this on, wipe it back, apply it to the back of the ornament as well. It will act as kind of like a stain on the back of it. And then I will also apply it to the front of the ornament. I'm using Type Bond wood glue to attach my casting to the front of the bell. Once that glue is dry, I went ahead and grabbed my Jolie finishing wax in the color white, and I'm going to be applying this over the entire ornament, brushing it on, getting it down into all the details of the deer, or I guess it's a buck actually, and then wiping that back. Now I'm taking my antique gold rub and buff. I'm just putting a little bit on a paper towel because I can dip my finger in there and go around the edges of the bell, as well as a little bit just barely on to the top edge of that. And then I will go ahead and add this to my casting as well, just kind of catching the high points. It was at this point that I decided I wanted to get rid of that jute hanger and replace it with a fancier type of ribbon. So I cut that off. I got as much of that jute off of there as I could. And before I apply the ribbon, I want to add these little pip berries, just a little dot of hot glue in the back, wrapping them around and then securing them on the front with another little bit of hot glue. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some little teeny tiny pine cones that have some of that gold on them. So it all, it helps to tie this all together. And then I can attach that new ribbon to the back for the hanger. So I cut a strip that was probably about a foot long, and I'm just going to make a knot, leaving enough, making sure that the hanging part is long enough. And so when I get it in position, I, just make another knot to make it nice and tight. And then I can attach that to the back of my ornament with some hot glue. Then I snip off those remaining tails that were hanging down, and this little ornament is all finished. Here's how it turned out. This next one is really simple and I absolutely love it. I have that resin tree and just a wood tag that came from Dollar Tree. I'm using my Type Bond glue to attach the tree to the wood tag. Once that was dry, I'm using Dixie Belle's chalk mineral paint in the color Palmetto. This is a really pretty green, and I'm going to paint over all of this, the tag, front and back, and the resin Christmas tree. when the paint was dry, I went in with my clear finishing wax so that I can go over this with a white wax and have more control over it. So just like before, I'm going to brush this on all over, wipe it back with a rag, and then I can go in with my white wax. Now onto the white wax. I'm going to make sure I get this brushed down into all those details of the little Christmas tree so that when you wipe this back, it will leave some of that behind, just making all that detail stand out. Now I'm going to add some Decoupage Enchanted Shimmer just over the tree. I'm brushing this on, getting a little bit, it's almost like a dry brush, but a little bit heavier than a dry brush. And then once that's dry, I'm using my gilding wax in the color Pearl. This is Gilded Touch gilding wax. I'm going to add this with my finger around the edges of the tag, and then I'm going to go ahead and touch over the high spots of the tree as well. For the hanger, I'm using this twine that is, it's white, but it has the silver wrapped in there with it as well. Just tying a knot at the top and trimming off the excess. And this little ornament is finished. Here's how it turned out. Next up is my mousse ornament. I really like how this one turned out. I'm using another Dollar Tree ornament, and I'm using this transfer from IOD's Figgy Pudding. This is super simple, but I just think it looks really cute. I'm going to, cut off that tag, remove the cap, and the first thing I'm going to do is apply my transfer. So I'm going to get it centered the best I can, tape it down, and then using my little transfer tool, I will apply this guy to the front of the ornament. Now working on these curved surfaces can be kind of intimidating, but it really does go quite smoothly. It will move with you as you transfer it on. It's somehow, it just seems to work every time. So now instead of that regular cap, I want to use a cork. So I have a very small collection, that little bag, that's all I've got of corks, and that one fit just perfectly in there. So I'm using my antique wax to give this a good coat so it will look nice and stained and a little more in tune with the theme of the ornament. Just wipe that on and then take off the excess. I'm using a baby wipe. You can use a paper towel or whatever. And now I have this little eye hook that I'm just going to go ahead and screw this into the top of that cork. I'm going to use some fine snow from Hobby Lobby to fill my ornament with. And so I've got this funnel. I found that if you tip it more sideways at an angle and just shake it, then it just goes right in there. It works a lot better than the way I was doing it at first. Now for the hanger, I'm attaching this strip of tea towel and just tying a knot at the top. This gives it a nice natural look that goes with the rest of this ornament. I'm gluing the cork in place with my Fabri-Tac glue, just running that around that top rim, and then I can push the cork in, and that will stay there for a very long time. This was so easy and fun, and here's how it turned out. For these next two frames, I'm using two more of the wood tags from Dollar Tree, as well as these laser cut photo frames from Hobby Lobby. I'm going to be using the wood tags as a backer for the frame so that I can apply a transfer to the inside of this frame. I just need to cut off there the top of the wood tag so that it sits flush with my frame. I want just enough of an overlap so that I can glue these in place. So I'm using my little miter shears to cut these. I can leave a link for those in the description box as well as everything else that I can leave links for in this video. I am now going to paint the frames and these back pieces with the color olive green. I don't need to paint the front of these wood tags because that's where I'm going to be applying my transfer. So now I'm just going to go ahead and paint the fronts and backs of the laser cutouts for my frames. It's time to apply our transfers to the front side of these, and I'm using the Iron Orchid Designs Fairy Merry Christmas. And I'm just picking out two of the ones that will fit nicely onto these wooden tags. I'm going to just go ahead and apply these the same way I did my other transfers, rubbing them on and then burnishing them with the carrier sheet. I'm using Spanish Olive to do a dry brush over the Palmetto Green. If you haven't figured it out by now, I tend to like blending my colors and having lots of variation. And I don't do a ton of that on this project, but I did want to add to this so it wasn't just a flat green. I wanted it to have kind of an aged look. So I did that, and then I went in with my Spanish Copper Rub and Buff. I'm using a brush that I use just with my Rub and Buff, and I start off with a really light hand on this. I didn't know if I would like it or not, and so you can barely see it, but I gradually add a little bit more and give it more of an aged look. So now with that done, it's time to take our Fabri-Tac glue and apply the little transfer piece to the back of the frame. Once I had that in place, I set it aside to dry and then did the same with the other frame. For the hanger, I'm using this satin ribbon that I got from Dollar Tree. It's kind of a nice off-white color, and I thought that would be perfect for this. I just looped that through the top section of the frame and then tie a knot, trying to get the length that I want as far as like how it will hang. Tie that off nice and tight, and then I trim off the ends. And that does it for these two. Here's how they turned out. This next one is actually a mini magnet I got from Dollar General. You could make it into an ornament by adding a hanger on the back, but for this one I left it as a magnet, and I'm giving this 2 coats of Dixie Belle's mineral chalk paint in the color Buttercream. This turned out so cute. I wish I had more of the transfers that I used on this one. If I could just get that transfer by itself, I would buy a dozen of them. And the transfer came from the IOD from this year, the Candy Cane Cottage Collection. It's the Santa up here in the upper left. He was the perfect fit for this square magnet. I could not believe it. And it looks so cute. Oh, I love it. So here we go, just another simple project that you just cannot even screw up on. I'm just going to apply him on top of that and rub that transfer on. I'll do a little antiquing around the edges and that will be it. Like, this is super simple. I'm using my Distress Oxide in Vintage Photo with my little sponge applicator. I'm just going to go around the edges of this guy, getting it just slightly on the front as well. And that is it for this one, you guys. Here's how he turned out. I love it. For this one, I'm using this paper mache blank from Hobby Lobby and my home decor cottage white chalk paint. I'm going to use some painter's tape just to tape off that hanger so that it doesn't fall down into my project while I'm painting it. And I didn't want to get paint all over it, so I just kind of move it up and out of the way with that painter's tape. And so now I'm going to go ahead and give this entire piece, front, sides, and back, 2 coats of the white chalk paint. I have this napkin I picked up from my local grocery store. It's got my little Christmas mouse. I was wanting to find a Christmas mouse for this season, so I was really happy when I found this napkin. I got to separate, I think there was 3 plies on there. You can use a piece of Scotch tape to just grab the corner and remove the remaining plies underneath the top layer. And it fits perfectly on this round. I'm just going to cut out 2 of these because I want to put one on the front and one on the back. I'm going to use Mod Podge, but I'm doing a different method. I'm going to put this on here and let it dry, and then I will be ironing on the napkin. It was too fragile to do it with the wet Mod Podge. So I put down a piece of parchment paper. Once that Mod Podge is dry, put down parchment paper, and using a craft iron, you go over this for about 10 or 15 seconds and it will reactivate that glue, and that paper will be stuck down to your surface. And this way you don't get any wrinkles. Like, this is perfect when you're using a really thin piece of paper like this napkin, because those are so fragile, you usually end up with a lot of wrinkles. So I just heated it up a couple of times. That's adhered really well. And now I can trim off the excess, and then I can do the same process on the other side of the ornament. With both of those ironed on there and the bulk of the excess cut off, I'm applying a coat of Mod Podge on top, making sure I hit those edges really well. And then when that's dry, I can sand off those edges with my sandpaper. Gives it a nice clean look. So now I'm going to use my matte gel medium clear, and I'm going to use these mica powders, a gold and a micro pearl and a kind of a blue violet color, mixed in with this medium to add a little pizzazz to that decoupage paper. But what I wasn't thinking about was the fact that the gel medium is a matte. So I didn't get as much shine as I would have liked. It's still added to it, but I wasn't thinking when I picked that particular medium that it was matte, so that wasn't helpful to my little journey here. But so I mixed that in, like, first with this gold color, and I'm adding that to the gold bulb on the ornament, just trying to add a little bit of sheen to it. And now this is like a blue violet color. It's not the exact color as the ornaments, but that shade is actually mixed in with those two, kind of the red and the purplish ornament. So I'm brushing a little bit on and then smudging it with my finger so that it blends really well and looks like it was meant to be there. And then lastly, I'm doing the same with the micro pearl. I'm going to mix that in with some of the gel medium, and I'm actually going to just kind of dab this around all over the white area of the ornament. Just kind of a, I don't know, it's not total coverage or anything. I'm just adding to it almost like if you were sponge painting it. I'm just kind of dabbing it on there. And then I'm going to also apply it to some of those little white lines on the ornaments. And I add some to the little top caps of the ornaments as well. It just makes it look a little more personalized than just a plain napkin. So now we are going to add this gold ribbon to the edge, a little dab of hot glue, and I'm going to push that first edge right up against that hanger as close as I can get. And then I'm just going to work in small sections because I want to make sure I keep this lined up straight on the edge. And I'm kind of hot gluing in a zigzag motion so I catch the edges as well as the middle. And work my way all the way around to the top, and then I will snip in the center of that ribbon so that it can kind of go around that hanger, and it gives it a much nicer finished look in the end. That's it for this one. Here's how it turned out. For our final project, and if you're still with me, you deserve a prize. This one I'm using a wood slice from Amazon and this decoupage rice paper that I picked up from Milton's daughter. It's miltonsdaughter.com. She has lots of beautiful decoupage papers and other supplies as well. I cut out the one that I wanted to use, and then I did more like a custom cut to fit the odd shape of this wood slice. So I would just put it on there, trim it up, and I just kept trimming it until it fit properly. And so I'm going to do the same iron-on method with the decoupage on this one. So I'm applying a good coat of decoupage or Mod Podge onto the wood slice, letting it dry. And now I'm going to line up my little piece of rice paper, put down my parchment paper, and iron it with my little craft iron, checking it to see if it's all adhered. I decided it needed a little bit more time, so I went over it again. And at this point, you do want to reestablish the hole in the top of that hanger. So I'm going to use a little wood skewer, finding the hole from the back and then punching it through from the front. And now we can go ahead and seal this in with another coat of the Mod Podge. And again, once you get the Mod Podge on there, you're going to want to reestablish that hole for the hanger. I'm also adding the Mod Podge around the edges because that bark likes to chip off. So I thought this would help seal it in and keep it in there longer than it normally would stay. So now I'm reestablishing that hole. And we can move on to the next step, which is adding the Distress Oxide ink with my sponge applicator. I wanted to go around the outer edge because I did have a few spots where the paper didn't completely cover the lighter wood underneath. And then I used my brush to get right in there on those lines to make sure that they were disguised. But honestly, I liked this better without the ink. Maybe it was this color. It was too dark. So I did wipe some of this back with a baby wipe. The Distress ink you can easily wipe back. It won't completely go away, but you can wipe it back. And then I just needed to add a hanger. I used just some jute twine. Just, putting it through, snipping it off, and tying a knot. Keeping it really simple. But I don't know. I kind of wish I wouldn't have done the Distress ink on this one because it was much more vibrant without it. But, let me know what you think. It's nice and rustic, that's for sure. But now with that, this one is done, and here's how it turned out. that's it for this one, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you find my content useful and will give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. But more importantly, I hope I've inspired you to go create something. See you next time.